Accidentally showing it. Hello, people. Hope everybody's doing good. We'll be getting started very shortly. Just get comfortable, and yeah, we'll be getting going with the stream. Had a little bit of a small panic. It's not that big of a deal, but for a moment I thought I couldn't find my drawing glove, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's I can't draw without the drawing glove. But I found it. It was off to the side. But hello everybody. Yeah, today we're gonna be doing a Q&A stream, so I'll be keeping an eye on chat and answering any of your questions. Well, I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. Obviously, there were some pre-loaded questions already, so we'll kind of be going through some of those pre-prepared chat questions, but then also any questions you guys have on the live chat. And then also, yeah, just like what Kevin is shouting out as well, that any super chats, those will get ultimate priority. And so yeah, I'll try to keep an eye on that as well, and I will do my best to keep an eye on it. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, submit them to super chat. It'll be awesome. But I guess we'll just get started immediately. So hello and everybody, welcome to our Q&A stream. My name is Josh, and I'm one of the instructors here at Wing Canvas. Now, if you guys don't know who we are over at Wing Canvas, there's no worries about that. We here at Wing Canvas, our mission is to make art education easily accessible to everyone. So join us for free live stream lessons on YouTube every week and level up your skills with our community of art nerds. And we're more than just a YouTube channel. We're an online school of illustration and visual storytelling dedicated to helping artists turn their passion into income. So a huge shout out to our amazing students and members for supporting our mission. We love seeing your incredible artwork and watching you guys grow in our classes and weekly critiques. And if you would like to dive deeper, join our Discord to access stream notes and demos, exclusive artwork, art challenges, and more free resources to help you guys improve. So come connect with fellow art nerds and get inspired. And not only that, but today's stream is also sponsored. So you guys could probably see on the upper right corner the XP Pen logo. And that's because we'd like to thank our sponsor for this stream, XP Pen, who have an awesome selection of digital art tablets for both beginner and advanced artists. And if you're looking for an affordable and reliable digital tablet, go browse their store. You'll find the link in the description below. So thank you very much, XP Pen, for supporting and sponsoring our streams. We really appreciate it. And yeah, so just a little bit of like a rundown in terms of like how this stream for today is going to run. I have a bunch of questions kind of loaded up. We sent out kind of like a survey Google form out there asking you guys like if there was any kind of questions that you guys wanted me to kind of go over or read, or just answer in general, not to go over and read. But yeah, if there were any kind of questions you wanted me to kind of answer. And so I have those questions loaded up, but also if you guys have any questions in chat, I'll try to keep an eye on them. Maybe Kevin will help out and kind of keep track of some interesting questions. But if I miss your question, maybe kind of bring it up again maybe a little bit later on down in the chat. But then also for any super chat questions, I will take those as high priority and answer those immediately, and I'll kind of give you a quick shout out as well. But not only that, but according to the poll, you guys wanted me to do a, let's see, a fan art mashup. So if you guys didn't know, over on our YouTube channel, we kind of put out a poll every now and then for our live streams, and I asked if you guys wanted me to draw some spooky shoes, zombify nils, take in chat suggestions, or do some style mashup, and it seems like style mashup has won. So while I'm answering your questions, I will also be doing a style mashup character design. So yeah, it's going to be a chill stream. It's going to be very kind of laid back and just going to be answering your questions, hanging out with you guys, talking with you guys, and yeah, spooky shoes. I actually thought spooky shoes would win. I voted for spooky shoes too, but I guess it didn't go so hot. I was gonna draw this, like, I don't know, rock character stepping on maybe like an amp with these like zombie, I don't know, monster shoes or something, but alas, we will be doing a style mashup. And of course, you know, since this is a chill stream, or I want it to be as chill as it could be, this is what I'm going to be drawing. So I'm going to bring it up on my screen right now. I'm using Pure Ref to drop all of my references in. And if you guys know anything about me, you know, I love Scott Pilgrim. And I would say the hype has kind of settled down a little bit on K-pop Demon Hunters, but I feel like that would be kind of like a cool mashup. So if you guys didn't know what a style mashup kind of project or character design kind of exercise is you take a style from one kind of property and a style or characters from another property, and you try to mash them together. And there's different ways to do it. You can either combine the... Here, maybe I'll write it. And hello, get the feels. Love the enthusiasm. But yeah, there's a few ways to do it. Either you combine the styles together, or you kind of mix and match the characters. Or you can come up with brand new characters in those kind of different universes. So the one that we're going to be doing is the style one. I usually just opt for the style one because that one's kind of a little bit easier to do, or I feel like it's the most fun and a little bit more chill to do. So you know, I think we'll do the styles one, a little bit more straightforward. Josh and Scott Pilgrim. Yo, you don't know how much okay, I don't love, okay, no, I do. I would say I'm a pretty big fan of Scott Pilgrim. They released like a new, like a figure set for knives, and who is it? Oh my goodness. And crap, I'm blanking out on the drummer girl's name. But yeah, they released the figure collection for her, and I like bought them. I'm like, ah. Also, today is the Blue Jays' final game against the Seattle Mariners. I don't know if we have any baseball fans here, but it's playing upstairs, and I'm like, I really want to watch it, but I'm just going to catch up on the highlights afterwards. But I am dying to know who's going to win. Oh, yeah, Kim. Yeah, it's Kim, the drummer girl. Okay. So, before I get started, maybe we'll start off with the first question. So, give me a sec. Here it is. Okay, so the first question is, how do you make a character not feel too much like a Mary Sue? So how do I make a unique character where the character doesn't look too perfect or too Mary Sue-ish? I guess for those who don't know what Mary Sue is kind of a character who... Actually, I guess maybe I'm not too sure the definition of Mary Sue, but I know that it was kind of used a lot during Star Wars The Force Awakens with Rey's character. So it's kind of like a character that's kind of they're kind of like new to everything, but they're able to kind of accomplish, and they're very like capable. They're very like strong and dependable as characters. They almost have like no flaws, and they're able to solve and figure things out on the fly, even if they're not too familiar with the obstacle or struggle that they're going up against. So that's kind of the Mary Sue. I feel like that one's more like a character writing flaw. I don't know if you can have a Mary Sue-ish design per se, or I guess maybe it's harder to have a Mary Sue design, Mary Sue-ish type of a design. But I feel like in general, it's pretty, I think you can, it's more of like a writing problem. So let's just go with the approach of like characters who look too perfect. I feel like there might be a question that's kind of similar to this one down the road, but I would say that my first kind of answer to this would be that if a character feels too perfect, you kind of maybe want to go back to the drawing board, because at its very core, a character's design should stem from more of like the, how should I say, the background or the story of the character. So it's really the character's personality traits, the story, the world building. Those are the things that's going to kind of be what guides the design of the characters. So I don't know if you can necessarily have too perfect of a character, because if you kind of flesh out the character's kind of personality traits, if you at least think of maybe their background or their kind of like backstory, that can help to flesh out the character, give it a little bit more grit, give the characters a little bit more kind of dimension to it, so that maybe it feels less like the character's too perfect. But that's kind of like my first take on the question. But yeah, if you guys have also any kind of takes on these questions, feel free to chime in on the chat. I think it would be kind of neat to hear what some of the audience members have to say when it comes to these questions. But yeah, going back to our drawing, I'm gonna be doing a mishmash of, I realized I never said what I'm gonna be doing. So I'm gonna be designing the K-pop characters in the style of Scott Pilgrim, just because I like the style of Scott Pilgrim. It's very simple, and it's a little bit easier to draw, but we'll see. And I feel like they're both quite cartoony in their poses, and they're both very kind of exaggerated and stylized, so I feel like it would work really, really well for this style combination. But we shall see. Because the one hard thing about the Scott Pilgrim style is that the face shapes are a little bit boxier, and they're a little bit more design focused. But yeah, Josh is very patriotic. I mean, I don't know if it's I mean, sure, I guess there's a little bit of it. So if people are like, oh, what are you talking about? The Blue Jays are playing right now, but it's because it's kind of a little bit of a historical moment. We haven't made it to the finals in like years. So if we win this one, we move on, and that would be like a really cool kind of success for us in a way. So I think it'd be really neat if we're able to make it to the finals. And yeah, so I'm gonna try to draw all three characters. I feel like that would be kind of fun. That would be kind of neat. And because Scott Pilgrim's style, like Brian Lee O'Malley, the artist's style in general, is fairly simple, I feel like hopefully it'll be a bit more manageable. But we will see. We will see. So we're just gonna draft up a really quick version of it. And also, I'm gonna try to keep an eye on chat as well while answering these questions. But like I said, if anybody has any takes on these questions that are brought up, feel free to chime in. Yeah. Oh, also, yeah, Kevin put out a definition for Mary Sue, a character that is free of weaknesses or flaws. That's a really, really good, straightforward take on the term Mary Sue. But I feel like that's why, again, for those who maybe missed it, who are just joining us, I feel like Mary Sue is utilized more for the writing, whereas design, if you feel like your character's designs feel too bland or straightforward, it could also be more of like a writing and backstory kind of issue. I feel like another way to kind of maybe solve, quote unquote, solve or get around the whole blandness is sometimes when it comes to character designs and creating a whole cast of characters, it can really come down to also the collection of characters. So if you have like not too many, or if you have a good collection of characters, but they all feel bland and the same, then maybe, yeah, it might be a good idea to change things up and kind of play around with some shapes and all that good stuff that is needed to make characters feel unique. But I think if you have a bland set of characters, especially a bland cast of characters, then it really might just be that you might have to um, change up some of the characters' shape languages, the shapes of them, the variety of their weight. So some maybe characters are heavier, some are lighter, some are thinner, some are bulkier, so that there's a little bit more variety with your characters' designs and everything. But at least that's kind of my take on it in terms of like bland characters. And it's going to be a little bit different for every project, and I think maybe a little bit different for every kind of person as well. If you're just designing one character, that one character might seem like amazing and might seem like really, really awesome. But then you might design like more characters and you'll find that they all kind of feel the same. So that's why it's also important that if you're designing a cast of characters, it's important to also keep in mind of how you're making them different and how you're kind of maybe diversifying or just changing them up, not only in just like ethnicity, but also in just like design and personality traits. Are some of them grumpy? Are some of them more cheerful? All those things will slowly guide you to make more interesting and unique characters. And yeah, so a lot of times when it comes to character design and like some of the issues that you guys might come upon when it comes to character designs, um, sometimes if you're coming across like a problem and you're trying to find a solution, I feel like a lot of the times I've noticed that the solution isn't to tackle it head on, but it's usually like a culmination of other issues that are surrounding your design. So if you feel like your design is bland, it could be that you didn't flesh out the character's personality traits enough, or you didn't flesh out the world enough, or their personality, or their backstory enough, because those things will end up guiding you and forcing you to come up with more interesting designs and aesthetics or shapes for your character. So sometimes best way to solve the problem is to not tackle it directly, but to kind of go around it and attack it from another angle or another perspective, or see what else is lacking elsewhere. But yeah, thank you for whoever submitted these questions. Also, I guess, by the way, I don't know who submits these questions. They're kind of just, they were kind of submitted anonymously, but yeah. Thank you, whoever submitted that question. Also, let me catch up on chat a little bit. I just have a big jug of water as well. I didn't bring caffeine or tea because I heard somewhere that sugar and coffee makes your throat scratchier. So I don't want to be clearing my throat while I'm streaming for you guys. Let's see. How would you come up with a name for your character? That one, I feel like the name sometimes can be something that you either know right off the bat, or it's something that you come up with as you design the character. Because sometimes you want the character to match the name as well. So I feel like it can kind of go both ways. Either you have it right from the beginning because you already got a feeling or you got a name that you really, really like and you just want to go with it. And then I feel like other times you'll maybe like not too sure about the name, and then I think it's okay to try to figure it out later. So name wise, I think it can kind of go in depending on the situation. Let's see. coolness is the most important part of the character design. I will agree with you. I think coolness does play a big factor in the character's design. Okay, if you submit a question right now, will it get answered in the stream? Maybe not necessarily. I'll try to keep an eye on your questions, but kind of like what Kevin said, if you guys send a super chat kind of question, I'll kind of know it. I'll hopefully see it more immediately because it has a more brightly colored banner with it when I look at the chat. But I'll try to also keep up and scroll in the chat to see if there's any like other extra questions. Yeah. Without making one 3 times the size of the... Oh, okay, this is a good question. Stella asks, how do I show a strong versus weaker character without making one 3 times the size of the other, if that makes sense? No, I think that perfectly makes sense. So posture is the big part of character design, especially when you're trying to show off the personality. So you have one aspect of character design, which is when you draw a character just as is. So if you just drew a character, they're just standing, they're doing the whole T pose, and then voila, you have the characters straight on design. But this is just more for like model purposes and making sure you know what the character's design looks like head on without any kind of extra flares or extra kind of movements to it that can kind of muddle the look of the character. But then you have a more dynamic design, which is the more personality trait of the character's kind of drawing or design that you go for. So if you want a character to look weak, then it might be good to make the character a little bit skinnier. It might be a good idea to make sure that the outfit or the clothing is a little bit shabby. Maybe it's a little bit torn. Maybe they're not dressed the best. Maybe clothing sizes just don't fit anymore, or they're oversized. Or the other biggest one is posture. So if you have someone who in general is like slouching, they're hanging over like this, and then their knees are bent, something like this, we immediately kind of just automatically just understand that this character is not probably in its like most fit state. They're probably a little bit rusty, they're a little bit rough. So posture plays a big part in kind of selling the personality traits of your character. Okay, no problem, Stella. But yeah, that in general is kind of like a pretty good rule to kind of take in, which is that a lot of times we kind of just think, oh, character design, it's just the drawing part. But big part of character design is also in the character traits and the personality traits and how you kind of convey those character personalities with like the posture, the poses, the silhouette, and all that kind of stuff. Oh man, the hard part about Brian Lee O'Malley's style with females, especially with characters who have like maybe sharper faces, is that they're like really stylized. So we'll see how well I can do this. But yeah, I'm gonna try to redraw these characters in the Brian Lee O'Malley style. Like, I'm just gonna redraw this pose, these poses, and this shot, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. I feel like it should be okay. But I say that all the time. So this is your first time in one of our streams, you're going to be like, oh, what is Josh talking about? It's like, well, sometimes I get a little bit overly ambitious and things get the better of me in terms of the design, but I'm pretty sure it should be okay. We'll kind of do this. I think it should be okay. And we probably won't like color it or anything like that. Oh, so like one kind of trait that I really like about Brian Lee O'Malley's kind of style is that he draws characters with very uniform legs and limbs, so there's not too much kind of tapering for like the elbows and the knees. the limbs, you'll notice with the arms, they're very kind of just like tube-like. Not exactly like Steven's universe or anything like that, but they're also not super anatomical. So it's not super stylized, but it's also not like super anatomical as well. So that's kind of why I like his drawing style. He knows when to push forms and shapes and when to kind of hold back a little bit. Yeah. How to nail their build without being overly buff? That's a good question too. So thank you, Peace Plebs. Sorry about the name pronunciation. I'll answer this pretty quickly. I'm gonna move on to the next like submitted question, but in terms of your question, I would say for guys, try to keep things a little bit more square-like, a little bit more rigid, not necessarily rigid in the sense that it's stiff, but you can draw guys a little bit boxier, a little bit more parallel. So this is a really quick kind of breakdown in terms of just like general female and male anatomy. Female bodies have a little bit more of a taper towards the waist, and that's where you get that whole hourglass shaped form from. Now obviously this is to really generalize and hone in on very exaggerated aspects and characteristics of the human body, but this is why there's sometimes you can very easily distinguish the difference between a feminine body versus a more masculine body. And then a male body still has a taper, but the male body tends to be a bit more parallel, and like things like the waist, the rib cage, it still tapers in, but things are much more boxier. So we still have a hip that goes out, and then we have like the groin, and then we have like the legs and everything. Females also have that, but things are usually a little bit rounder. Things taper in much quicker, whereas male bodies are a little bit boxier and more square-like. So that's like kind of why a lot of character designers tend to hone in on this kind of shortcut, so to speak, because it's just much easier to identify when you look at it when you look at a character at a quick glance. So if you're ever trying to figure out like, oh, how can I really accentuate a more feminine body, or how can I push and exaggerate a more masculine body, this is how you do it without necessarily making it more muscular, or maybe even making a female character too skinny. So it's more about just like understanding like what makes a body feel more feminine and what makes a body more masculine. It's kind of like the tapering and the more hourglass aspect, and the more for a female body, and then a more parallel, more boxier body shape for a more masculine body. But hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, let's see. With other, I mean, you know, once you get into like really muscular, buff-looking people, it gets a little bit tricky. Okay, so the second question. Wait, I'm gonna take a sip of water and then I'll read the question out. Oh, hello, Vin. Wow, I feel like I haven't seen you in a long time, or maybe you popped in here and there and just miss you all the time. But glad you're able to join. Hello. Okay, so the second question is, what's a character design myth? Okay, so there's multiple questions in this one. What animation exercise that I can do as a beginner, and what are ways I can improve for character design? Okay, so what is a character design myth? Oh. Oh, I think this one is a pretty good one. Cartoony characters are easy to do. I feel like that's a pretty big character design myth, which is that characters like SpongeBob or Kim Possible or Steven Universe or Gravity Falls, like I'm just kind of thinking of cartoon shows that I've seen off the top of my head, or even Fairly Odd Parents. They seem very simplified, and they're very kind of shape based, and I think a lot of times people, especially people who aren't in the art industry, or like your friends or relatives who've never drawn before, they'll look at that and be like, oh, that's so easy to draw, you can draw it. But maybe it's easy to copy, and maybe it's easy to like reproduce and kind of like redraw those characters over and over again. But what makes it hard is actually designing those characters from scratch. So I think there's a lot of misconception that simple cartoony characters are really, really easy to draw, when in fact they're actually some of the hardest characters to come up with and design, especially if you're not someone who's familiar with stylizing or pushing kind of character design. I feel like it can be quite you can very easily underestimate how hard those characters are to design and come up with. The other thing too is that I think a lot of people tend to misunderstand or not realize how much structure and anatomy goes into very cartoony characters. So not to say that a character like SpongeBob or Patrick has like realistic anatomy or anything of the sort, but I think a lot of people tend to not realize there's a lot of thought process that goes into making sure those characters stay consistent in their design and in their structure. So if any of you guys are thinking about getting into character design and you want to design cartoonier characters and you've always felt like something feels off, or if you've ever had teachers or other artists or other people in the art community go like, you know, there's something off about your drawing, like it looks good, there's some like good style to it, but there's something missing. Chances are that it's not that your drawing is bad, but there might be just some few things like perspective or structure that, or volume, a sense of volume is missing in the character's design. So I feel like that's a pretty big misconception that I tend to kind of see not only in the art community in terms of like discussions and critiques, but also just in general from the general public, which is that a lot of people tend to think that just because it's cartoony that it's easy to draw or easy to design. And I think that's the big one, is that it's a lot of people think cartoony characters are easy to design, but they're actually not. I would say that they can be some of the most trickiest and hardest characters to design and come up with, and coming up with a really, really, really good cartoony character design is super, super hard. But yeah. Also, I know that some people are throwing up some questions here. That having slightly smaller eyes always helps drawing. that could be a good one. I think it also really just depends on the style. So I did notice that when I was doing a Batman the Animated Series style study, which is that for guys, the guy's eyes tend to be a little bit more like, if you look at Batman, so Batman the Animated Series, if you guys don't know, is based off of Bruce Timm's kind of drawing style. This is kind of how he goes about drawing eyes for like Bruce Wayne and all the kind of male characters, but then the female characters have a little bit more roundedness to them. They're a little bit larger, they're a little bit more expressive, and they tend to be more like this. So like I would say that it can be kind of true for Plebs' question or kind of observation, but it really just comes down to the style that you're going for. But I feel like that could be a good rule to try out, and it's never let's say a bad idea to give it a shot and experiment and try it out and see if it works for your style as well. Stop missing stream. Well, glad you're able to join us, Vin. Good guy of the story feels scary if they're secretly the villain. Oh, that's a good question. It could be like subtle things in maybe the outfit or even the color scheme. I don't think it's a good idea to go like, oh, bad guys should have pointy noses or crooked teeth or baggy eyes, because you can have good wholesome characters who also have those character traits. So I think like in a lot of like maybe of like animated films or shows, the way that they kind of go about doing that is with the color scheme. So making a little bit darker color schemes or having some certain colors represent kind of like a repeated theme in representing like evil. So if in the beginning of your series or if in your world you decide like, oh, the color red's gonna represent like bad guys or bad characters or villains, then you can have like splashes of red maybe in the character's outfit, and so it kind of almost like subtly hints that the character is like bad. Actually, I heard a funny little kind of tidbit about a movie. I don't know, this might be like really off tangent, but there's a clause out there that if you want to use Apple phones in your movies, only good guys can use Apple phones, and bad guys cannot. Villains cannot use Apple phones. And in the movie Glass Onion, which is kind of like a murder mystery thriller film on Netflix, they had a real struggle with it because they wanted to have Apple phones, or they needed Apple phones for the characters to use, but it was kind of like a giveaway. It was too obvious and it was too much of a spoiler that like this character was bad because they would never hold like Apple products. So that was like a fun little trivia that I thought was kind of like neat. um let's see. Yeah, I feel like shapes and using character traits to represent quote unquote villainy in your characters can work. Don't get me wrong. I think like Kingpin is really menacing because of how big they are. And like a lot of times villains would have like really long pointy noses or really sharp eyes or really sharp features, but I feel like it's not always it's a little bit too on the nose now, I guess. It's a little bit too obvious. Whereas I feel like nowadays you can kind of hint at it more with color schemes. So that's not to say that. So, for the example, I use the color red. This is not me saying that red is always going to be the color of evil or bad, but it's more of like if you decide that red is used to represent like evil or villainy in your world or in your collection of characters, then that's kind of how you can hint at it. I think there's also like just natural colors that we tend to associate with quote unquote evil colors or like evil characters. Usually is like darker, sometimes even more neon, more red, like dark magenta or dark navy blue, like can be used to represent like evil. But or yeah, purple, like purple can be used for bad guys as well, I think is like a big one. So it really can kind of, there's no necessarily set rule, but it's more of like you have to set the rule. So once you set kind of the parameters of what makes a character bad, then that is kind of like you want to stick by that rule as much as possible. Too on the nose. I know. As I said it, I was like, I was like a cheeky little pun. I made the hand maybe a bit. This one's gonna be maybe a bit tricky because the style of Scott Pilgrim's hands are like huge. So don't know. We're gonna have to maybe make some like shortcuts with the hands. Also, I think I made them like way too like lanky, but I don't know. Might have to adjust some stuff. Also, let's see. How do you find good references pieces for medieval era? That one's a good one. Oh man, I would say don't necessarily just rely on like Google or Pinterest, but sometimes costume websites are really good. There's a really good costume website that I use. I can't remember it off the top of my head now, but they have a large collection of just armors, more medieval kind of. It's more meant for like Ren Fair or cosplaying purposes. I don't think you can rent their costumes, but you can buy their costumes. But on their website, they have a lot of reference photos because they're quite expensive and people buy them, and they're quite like elaborate. But I would say like costume websites are really good for medieval references. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know what? Anything when it comes to history or any kind of like historical drawings, I do think that it's probably best to also check and make sure that things are kind of, I guess, true to its time, or that you're not kind of like over glamorizing it for the sake of making it look cool, but there's some kind of, I don't know, believability in the way that it is. Hopefully that makes some sense. what I'm trying to say is like, try to lean into some historical accuracy as much as you can. But if it's not possible, I think that's a little bit okay. I think you can kind of get away with it if you need to. But definitely do some research. Try to figure things out in terms of like, oh, in this time period, what would these people wear, or like, did this outfit even exist during this time period, and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that would help a lot with making sure things feel historically accurate. Yeah. Okay, so I have the only character that's like remotely kind of that has like a figure, quote unquote, very feminine figure in Scott Pilgrim is Envy Adams. So I'm gonna use Envy on the side here. Well, I don't have it on my screen, but I'm using one of like the books. I have the Scott Pilgrim comic book on the side for quick references and quick like easy access. But I'm gonna be using it to kind of help guide kind of design decisions, I guess, in terms of like how to go about kind of making the characters feel like they're inside of like the Scott Pilgrim universe. Also, I feel like Brian Lee O'Malley draws with a lot of square fingers, so even if they're kind of feminine, he'll draw them with like square like hands. So that's why drawing fingers a little chunky, not super chunky, but just like a little bit chunky. Oh, human-friendly, grandfatherly feet. Riddler is a great example. Character with associative colors. Low green is always bad in Batman. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good example of one where color is used. Yeah, I feel like once you kind of realize colors are used a lot to kind of hint at what characters are maybe like potentially good and what characters are bad, you kind of start noticing it a little bit more. You become a little bit more aware as to how colors are used to represent like villainy or heroes, or even like kind of like a transition for the character, which I think is always kind of neat. So like I said, the style for Scott Pilgrim is very there. It's like not too anatomical, but it's not too stylized. But Brian Lee O'Malley tends to draw like characters with really big boots, so I feel like we gotta honor that by giving Rumi really big boots, and to make her legs maybe just a little bit thicker than how it is in the movies, just because that's kind of how Brian Lee O'Malley kind of goes about drawing feet or legs in general. And not only that, but he also tends to not taper stuff. So not only am I answering questions, but I'm trying to also explain style studies and how I'm picking out certain design decisions for these characters. So if you're kind of wondering like, oh, how come you're doing this for the legs, or how come you're drawing the legs like this? And it's because that's kind of how the style for Scott Pilgrim is, and I'm trying to implement it into the characters' designs. Video games? Oh, maybe. I actually, I never noticed it in video games, but maybe time to keep an eye out for it. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. And also, by the way, I haven't put all the submitted questions here. So if we end up running out of questions, I'll answer any questions that are in chat, but then also maybe I'll grab some of the questions that I didn't include into this slideshow of questions. But the third question is actually, wait, did I answer all the questions? I don't think I did. Oh, okay, let's see. What animation exercise can I do as a beginner? The bean method and the pillow exercise. So I always highly recommend this to students who are like maybe considering getting into animation, because I think one thing that a lot of maybe people don't realize animation is acting. So it's not just being able to design characters and draw characters and bring characters to life. A big part of animation is acting and being able to kind of extract the personality out of your drawings. So some really good studies are to just, when you're doing some figure studies, to really exaggerate it with like the bean exercise. So maybe it's like, oh, you know, like this is the hand, and he's really like, you know, maybe he's fighting or something. Play around with the proportions, play around with the stances. I don't know. This is like the bean exercise. You draw like a little bean and you give the bean some limbs. And it's to really kind of work on exaggerating and pushing poses. The next one is the pillow exercise. So the pillow exercise is really great for teaching you how to kind of transfer what you see in a reference pose and try to extract the pose and the personality in the reference and attach it to an object that's completely different. So because the pillow doesn't have a head, it doesn't have arms, it only really just has a torso. How do you capture the same pose in a pillow? So I'm just running through it really quickly, but those are some really good exercises in case you've never seen it before and you don't know what the pillow exercise or what the bean exercise is. But I would say that those are some really good exercises if you're trying to get into animation, because it kind of teaches you to expand beyond just the references, to expand beyond just kind of just copying the reference, but instead going like, how can I push the reference more? It doesn't mean to necessarily bend all the arms in really crazy poses or really twist and bend the torso in crazy directions, but it's like, how can I sell the sense of weight and balance and personality in the character's poses that I'm seeing here, and how can I transform it into something that doesn't look exactly like the reference? Well, what I mean by that is like, maybe it doesn't have the same body shape or the same personality traits. So how can you do that? And the pillow and the bean exercise, I think, is a really good way of easing you into that kind of mentality. Okay, then the next part of the question was, what are ways to improve character design? I think another big one, kind of like that I mentioned beforehand, is just kind of coming up with some backstory. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate how useful it can be to have a good backstory for your character. Or else you are going to end up drawing the same character over and over and over again. Especially if you've come up with a style and you've kind of nailed the style down. I would say that the best way to try to break out of that is to then try to come up with characters based on backstory, not based on just like, oh, the character looks cool. Like, that can be a starting point, and I think that can be kind of like a good initial beginning. But after a certain point, you'll just kind of draw the same characters over and over again, and I think best way to do that is to design characters based on personality traits and backstory, rather than just oh, this character design looks cool. I feel like that will only carry you so far after a certain point, and you'll kind of just get stuck drawing the same things after a while. So I think a big part is to try to come up with some backstory, kind of try to come up with some personality traits, even just simple ones, just like, oh, is this character, do they get mad easily? Are they very forgetful? Are they someone who is not very trusting, or do they have a lot of friends? Are they very friendly? Are they very sociable? Like, just these simple questions. If you ask yourself these things as you're designing your characters, you'll notice that those answers that you come up with as you're asking those questions is what's going to help to shape your character's designs. And I feel like that's like a big part that not a lot of people kind of realize, is like, good character design isn't necessarily just drawing a really cool looking character, but it's also making sure that the character's personality traits come through in the character's designs. So whether it be the colors, the clothing, the pose, the stances, like, all those things should play a big part in how the character kind of feels and their personality traits. So hopefully that answers a little bit of a question. There's a lot that can obviously go into character design, so I'm obviously only really scratching the surface of what can go into character designs and all that kind of stuff, but hopefully this answers some of those questions. Let's see. Oh, you guys are still talking about superheroes and colors. That's funny. Okay, so gonna go on to the third question. Oh, I guess before we go into the third question, let's see. We got a little chat question as I was saying this. I got this character who's a robot. What are some good references I could look at for robot characters? Oh, oh man. Kevin, you might have to help me out with this one. Do you remember that boxing movie? Do you know what I'm talking about? The one with Hugh Jackman. I guess I could just look that up. Hugh Jackman boxing movie. Oh, Real Steel. Yeah, that's the movie I'm thinking about. That's a cool movie. That movie has like a lot of really interesting robot designs in there. I don't know, you can kind of get inspiration from that. Pacific Rim, I feel like, is a really cool one as well. That could offer a lot of inspiration. I think it also depends on the kind of style you're going for. So things like Pacific Rim, Real Steel, it has a little bit more of that grungier kind of, everything kind of feels slick and oily and beaten up. But if you want more like sci-fi, things that are cleaner, those things can be a little, I don't know, you can maybe I'm trying to think of like what, like Alita Battle Angel kind of is like that, maybe. But yeah, that's the other thing too, is like, is it mech? Is it like, what style could it be? But I think that's why Kevin first recommendation, appliances, machines, is a really good one, because it's not biased towards any genre specifically, but it's up to your interpretation then as to how you want to design those characters. So if you're trying to design robots or mechs that are a little bit more kind of that retro futuristic utopian vibe, kind of like Fallout or the new Fantastic Four movie has that aesthetic, then things are a little bit sleeker, everything's a little bit shinier, there's not too many like moving parts that you can see. Whereas if you're kind of going for that more grungier, a grittier vibe, then I think like Pacific Rim or Real Steel would kind of match that a lot. But it also depends on your art style too. So if you're someone who's more realistic, then you'll want to really dig deep into kind of maybe looking at things like cars, just mechanics, finding references for like how do mechs and mechanisms work in machinery. But if you're more stylized and more cartoonier, then things like I see here, someone like Samurai Jack would be a really good one, or even like FMA is kind of in that middle ground of like realistic but cartoony as well. So yeah, really good, kind of cool question. Josh and Kevin teaching us about oldie movies. Those movies aren't even that old, vid. Actually, now I'm thinking about, when did Real Steel does feel like a long time ago. Oh my, 2011. Oh my gosh. Jeez. FMA isn't real. Sorry to crush your dreams, Kevin. Okay, the third question is, how do you depict a character's feelings and emotions in their clothes and outfit? Oh, okay, I feel like we kind of partially answered this one with the whole like, oh, it can kind of come down to the colors. So I think like the shapes of the clothing, the what is it? Yeah, the shapes of the clothing, the colors of the clothing, those things can really help to accentuate and kind of showcase who your character is. So if your character is like friendly, it might be a good idea to have like brighter, more kind of saturated colors for your character. Whereas if your character is like a little bit more beaten down and maybe they're a little bit, I don't know, they look at life, they're a little bit more pessimistic when looking at life, then maybe it might be good to use a little bit more darker colors. Maybe use kind of clothing that's a little bit more reflective of that grungier vibe. Um, but I do feel like clothing, there's so much that can go into like the fashion and the outfits that characters wear. And again, kind of same advice that I would give to like most people, which is do research. There's a lot of different kind of clothings and styles and fashion pieces that are out there, and I feel like you're doing yourself you can do yourself a disservice by not looking into kind of like things like trends. There's nothing wrong with looking at what's kind of trending, what's kind of working with people, but also kind of understanding like why those things worked in during those trends and during those times. But yeah, I feel like looking into trends could be like a really useful thing to check out. Man, it's kind of hard to see what's happening with the hand over here. I'm like, I know she's holding knives, but I'm like, wait, how's she holding these knives? But yeah, I feel like that's a pretty straightforward question. Let's see. How would you design an evil healer? Let's see. Bad bar is thinking reverse of that. Oh. I feel like usually if there's like an evil healer, you end up leaning in towards like kind of like the corrupted doctor kind of character trope or trait. So I don't know, like like Arcane. I know that they kind of redeem the guy at the end, but he's kind of like a character that's evil. Oh hey, oh my goodness, somewhere out there, thank you for the donation. Does this count as a super chat? I'm like so rusty or like not too familiar with it. Kevin, does this count as a super chat? But thank you somewhere out there. Wow, $25. Thank you so much for the donation. We really appreciate it. Yeah, that's awesome. So somewhere out there's question is just donate. Oh, I guess this is not a given question. It's just you're just saying, hey, just donating, missing the last streams. Hope everyone is doing well. Well, thank you so much somewhere out there. Wow, you really appreciate the generosity and the donation there. And hopefully you get to stay. I don't know if you're too busy and are unable to stay any longer, but hopefully you're able to stay and catch like the stream. And I know that you said you kind of missed some, but hopefully you get to stay a little bit longer if you do need to go. But yeah, thank you so much. So for this right now, I know I have like about an hour left. My goal is not necessarily to um so if you're kind of like looking at how I'm drawing this and stylizing this, you might be like, "Oh, Josh, what is the goal here? What is the objective for how you're drawing this?" You'll notice that I'm starting off with these really big shapes, and essentially I'm treating this kind of like figure drawing. So instead of trying to map out necessarily all the anatomical structures, I'm just keeping it roughly in the back of my mind to help guide my drawing decisions. But for the most part, I'm actually just trying to copy what I see in the image and try to replicate it in the shape design and shape language of like Scott Pilgrim. But that's kind of like the goal here. And then let's see. Somewhere out there says, "No problem. Hope to make a bigger donation next time." Oh, thank you. Well, only if you're feeling so generous. But thank you so much. I don't know what I could have asked. Not sure if you could see whose question is, but I hope mine could be answered since I have several. Yeah, that's kind of what the super chat is for. It's to get my attention somewhere out there. So you definitely did. So if you have a question, feel free to throw it out there. I'll answer it as best as I can. I know that you said that you have a lot, so yeah, shoot out, shoot your questions. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. My brain was like, yeah, shoot. Is it just shoot? It's just like shoot the question. I don't know. Should I make it short? You know, I'm gonna make this a little bit shorter. Or not shorter. I want to make the legs a little bit more tapered here. Also, I'm not gonna redraw exactly the shoes in the way that they're designed, because that would take forever. But we're gonna go at it in the Scott Pilgrim style, so big and chunky, just the way I like it. Nice big chunky shoes. Even when I don't get to draw spooky shoes, I find a way to draw shoes. I forgot what it was. There was a stream, and then Kevin popped in, and it was like, no matter what, I just end up finding a way to draw shoes. And it's like, I'm just like, you know what? I didn't do it on purpose, but I see your point. It just always ends up somehow going back to shoes. Don't get Josh started on shoes. If you haven't answered this question already, what's your go-to method for dealing with bad days? Oh, wait, actually that's one of the questions. I do actually have this question loaded up somewhere out there. I don't know if it's a little bit later, but I guess I can answer it now. It's actually in my slide of questions, but I was gonna answer it down the road. Yeah, so the question again is just like, how do you deal with like bad days, or you're feeling sad or tired, or just maybe like kind of out of it? For me, yeah, I think it's what I've noticed, I think like lately, especially more recently, is it sounds really lame maybe, but it's just like going outside is kind of nice. I know there's that whole like joke and meme of like, oh, go touch grass, but genuinely I think like the sun does a lot. I think you know, as artists we like to work in like maybe in our room, we like to shut off the window and kind of enclose ourselves in kind of like a dark room or something while we draw. Maybe I'm just projecting how the room that I'm in when I'm drawing is like just dark and there's no windows. But what I've noticed is that when I'm in an open room, it makes a really big difference with just kind of like my mood sometimes. So like kind of drawing in a room where there's like an open window, where it's nice and bright, where it's not too cramped even, I find that it's kind of just more, it's nicer to draw in. Not to say that drawing in like a closed encased room is not like, you can't do it. It's like, oh, I only have like a small room, Josh. Do I need to get a bigger house or something? Then it's like, no. But you know, if you're able to find a way to like maybe go outside and draw outside, or do some studies where there's like where it's nicely lit with just natural sunlight, I find that it can help a lot with just like the mood, with just kind of like how awake you can be as well when it comes to your mood. So I do find that sometimes just working outside in the sun or finding a nice open window can help a lot with the overall kind of tone, kind of mood. So that's like one thing in terms of like a more, I guess, kind of cheesy cheesy example of how I kind of go about it. The other one is, yeah, doing kind of just things that I find fun. So like volleyball is a good one. I like, I was pretty sporty as a kid, so I like doing kind of physical activities to kind of change the pacing and kind of change kind of like yeah, just change up the pace a little bit, because drawing is a very slow, methodical, very meditative kind of activity. And I find that, like, you know, playing some sports to mix it up is like a nice way to change things up. So I guess like if you're someone who doesn't play sports and you're like, oh well, Josh, I don't play sports, what do I do with that information? Then it's like, well, I would say do something that breaks up the pace a little bit, that changes up the rhythm of what it is that you're doing, because drawing is very slow. It's a very kind of you just sit there and you hunker down for like hours staring at your drawing for a really, really long time. But if you're able to find some kind of extra activity that changes the pace and the just kind of the vibe of what it is that you're doing, then I think it can already do a lot. So yeah, kind of find an activity to do that changes the mood and the pace a little bit. All his walls are mirrored. That would be wild. I if all my walls were mirrored, that would be. I feel like that would be kind of crazy. Um, I feel like I would lose my mind if all my walls were mirrors, Kevin. But yeah, that's kind of one way. I love playing, like, I love video games. I love movies. So sometimes just going out and watching movies with friends is nice. It's also kind of like a nice way to refuel your imagination, I think, and kind of recharge your creativity and also just how you see the world. I think a really good one is to just consume media that you might not necessarily. Actually, let me reword that. Try to kind of absorb media and stories that might challenge your views and takes on things. So I always think it's like sometimes I don't know, like a response to just go like, oh, I don't agree with that take of the movie, or action movies aren't my things. But that's like a oversimplification. But I think that sometimes, like, taking a look at things with a more open mind when it comes to like stories and movies can be like really, really helpful to just kind of expand your way of just observing and viewing things. And that's always going to be helpful when you're doing art, to just kind of go like, oh, well, how does this person view things? Or why would this person ever do that, make that decision or choice in this story? And it kind of forces you to try to understand, be a bit more understanding from like different perspectives, and be a little bit more open-minded. Not necessarily in like, oh, gotta be more open-minded and accepting of things, but more of like being able to look into other people's, or step into other people's shoes and kind of see things from a new perspective that you might not have considered. So I feel like watching movies and reading books and watching shows does a really good job of getting you to absorb things that you might not necessarily consider naturally, I guess. But hopefully that kind of helps a little bit. Also, I realized, like, oh man, I gotta draw this character with front facing. I was like, oh no, not front facing. I hate front facing characters. But yeah, watching things, I feel like, is a nice way. Like, I've always grown up watching movies and shows, so like shows and movies, and video games have always been kind of like a thing to help change up the pace for myself. But yeah, that's kind of, for me, that's kind of how I kind of relax a little bit for myself. Oh, I do see that you have another question. Yeah, and I don't mind answering it. Let's see. Your next question is, how do you do a whole drawing in 1 to 2 sittings? Because I struggle with going through an entire drawing process in one go. Well, you know what? I think it's totally fine if you can't finish it all in one go or one sitting. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with having to finish a drawing in like maybe multiple sittings or multiple kind of sessions. I think it really kind of depends on the project that you're working on. So, hard question for Josh. It's like, yeah, I'm the perfect person to ask. I'm always taking forever with drawings. But no, I think it really just kind of depends on what you're drawing. So sometimes studies, and I think I said this to one of our members, who like also struggles with this too. And so he was saying that like sometimes he doesn't know when to let go of a project or a painting, to when to move on. And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to spend a long time on a piece, especially if it's a study. So if you're doing kind of like a still life study or a portrait study, and it needs to be like a really, really long kind of study where you're trying to be as realistic as possible, then it might be a good idea to take the time to slow down and spend a few hours or even maybe a few days to do the study. You don't have to necessarily finish it in one sitting because it's meant to be realistic. It's meant to really push the boundaries of your knowledge and your understanding of like realistic lighting and rendering. And rendering takes time. And I think a lot of people don't realize this, which is that realistic rendering, the more realistic you go, the more time it takes, because now you're trying to be a little bit more realistic. You're trying to take in the time to really blend things in and kind of be smooth and clean with your line work. And you can't do all that kind of stuff in like 2 hours. That kind of stuff takes like a lot of hours. Especially if you're trying to be really, really clean and smooth with your line work. So I think it's totally fine. But if you're doing like a quick figure drawing study, maybe let's say you're doing like I don't know, like just a quick character design or figure drawing exercise, then yeah, maybe it might be a good idea to try to give yourself a little bit of a timer. Maybe try to finish the piece in like a few, like maybe just a few hours or so. But yeah, that's just to answer the kind of notion, or to address the notion of like, oh, drawings or sessions should be like, drawing sessions should be quick, which I don't think that they need to be. But in terms of like, oh, what if it is meant to be like a short session? Like, how do you like deal with distractions and all that? For me, it's just like having music on, having like a podcast, or having something that I can kind of just listen to in the background. Also, just learning to take breaks is good too. So taking breaks, learning to step out to the side can help a lot in just like kind of helping you reset. So like when you're drawing and it's like a really long drawing session, sometimes we can get a little bit, well, I say I'll just use myself as an example. Like, you know, you can get a little bit burnt out from your drawing if you are drawing nonstop for too long. So sometimes it's a good idea to just remember to take a break and, I don't know, walk around the house a little bit, maybe go outside, just watch a quick video, but don't spend the whole day watching the video. You know, just watch it for a little bit, just to kind of, again, change up the pacing, change up the mood, change up the kind of tone, so that you're doing something a little bit different. Yeah. Creativity can't happen without feel. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, sometimes I feel like we forget that, like, oh, the reason why sometimes we get inspired is because we saw something that was like really cool. So then we're like inspired to draw that. And then we forget to continue in getting like fuel and fueling up with ideas and different kind of projects and stories that we see. But yeah, no, really good question somewhere out there. I really appreciate the question that you're kind of posing. Let's see. Also, what is worth taking a lot of time on? Yeah, that's a good point by Kevin. So yeah, going back to it, is like if you're doing a realistic study and it's like painting, and the goal is to challenge yourself to be as realistic and detailed as possible, then take as much time as you realistically can. It could be like you spend a whole week on this project or this painting. But if it's meant to be like a quick like character design or figure drawing study that's supposed to be like maybe like just one day, then spend like 1 day or 2 days at most trying to work on it. But spend a good amount of time, and depending on your skill level, depending on how detailed you want to be, those numbers might change. So like, even though I'm throwing out like, oh, take a day or two to work on it, depending on how you like to draw, depending on your skill level, depending on your style that you're going for, those numbers might change depending again on how you're doing it or how your style is. So this goes for everybody as well. As like, you know, I might be throwing out these numbers, but it doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, it has to be these numbers exactly. really good questions. Thanks. Oh, Clarina has a question. What do you do when you try to stylize a character and it has their clothes and hair but doesn't look like the character? Uh, huh. You try to stylize a character, doesn't look. Then I would maybe kind of reconsider the rules that you gave your style. So a lot of people, especially if you're trying things out, we can kind of get caught up in the act of drawing, and we forget that there are certain quote unquote rules to styles. So as an example, I'm doing the K-pop Demon Hunters. So actually, that's a great question for as I'm doing this kind of style mash project. I'm doing the K-pop Demon Hunters in the style of Scott Pilgrim, or as best as I can, because I don't naturally draw like Scott Pilgrim in this style, but I feel like it's a little bit more of an easier to manage style for me in like 2 hours. But some things that I will observe when doing styles or kind of approaching this drawing style is like, oh, what are some things that they're doing that's a little bit different from how I would do things? So I'll notice that the hands are bigger. I notice that the limbs and the finger digits are more like squares. There's not a lot of details in the fold lines. Everything's very boxy and very kind of outlined, very simplified. But things are technically in the correct anatomical spot or position. But it's not super detailed. So a lot of times when we're stylizing characters in crazy dynamic poses, we kind of get lost in and forget the rules that we gave ourselves. So if you're doing a really crazy pose and then all of a sudden you give a lot of fold lines when you typically don't draw your characters with a lot of fold lines, then it'll make the character feel different. It'll make the style that you have feel more realistic than more stylized. So as an example here, I was kind of mentioning how the K-pop style is more anatomical. So you can see things like the kneecaps, you can see how the thigh tapers towards the knees and it expands out towards the calves, and then it again tapers towards the ankles. But Scott Pilgrim doesn't really have that style. He naturally typically kind of has things very chunky, very parallel, and the legs don't really necessarily taper too much towards the joints and the knees and the ankles. And so I try to maintain that when I was drawing these characters in the Scott Pilgrim style. You'll notice that I'm not really trying to indicate things like the kneecaps or the knees or the ankles, and in fact I'm making things very chunky and very boxy to make it feel a little bit different from how K-pop Demon Hunter's natural style would be. So those are like small things. So just kind of keep an eye on like the quote unquote rules that you gave yourself when you're designing the characters. What does the line work like? What is the line weight like? How big are the eyes? Did you add a lot of detail in the clothing? Were there a lot of folds or were there not a lot of folds? And all these kind of small little things that we kind of take for granted in a way actually are like kind of tiny little pillars that uphold the style that you have in your drawings. But yeah, hopefully that answers a little bit of your question, but really great question. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the fourth question. Wow, we're going so slow with these questions. How important is it to draw from life? Ooh, yeah. Okay, so I thought this was kind of like a neat question. Obviously, I guess like maybe the immediate response is like it's super important, super important to draw from life. Because that's kind of where things stem from. So when I'm doing character designs, I think a lot of and myself included, I think like when I first started drawing characters and learning how to draw, there was this kind of misconception on my part where I thought like, oh, well I'm drawing like exaggerated stylized characters. I don't need to know how a realistic face should be. I don't need to kind of figure out how like proper body proportions or how the body works. Like all those things, I can figure it out later, or I can kind of work on that afterwards. But I'm just going to work on stylizing first. But the thing is that most of the stylized drawings that you see from artists that you admire, they are building up their drawing skills based on realistic faces. They're building and developing their drawing skills and capabilities based on what the actual head is supposed to look like. So if you don't know what an actual face is supposed to look like, or you don't know like where to properly put them proportionally and all that kind of stuff, it is going to make your drawings feel a little bit unstable in a way, in a sense that it feels like it's obvious that you might not know exactly where to put things. So it's always a good idea to understand where things kind of stem from in terms of like drawing designs. There's a lot of design kind of shortcuts that a lot of people take that we could kind of just like assume that, oh yeah, everybody draws those things like that, so I'm gonna draw like that, but it actually stemmed from realistic stuff. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one. Maybe like, I feel like it's kind of works, which is like fold lines. A lot of us kind of draw fold lines with these very minimal lines, and we go like, oh yeah, that's kind of just how everybody draws them. But it's actually like an animation principle. Now, I don't know if it originates from an animation principle, but it's used a lot in animation principles to simplify fold lines with like two lines. So if I'm drawing a fold for a shirt, this is what a lot of people tend to draw now. This fold line right here. Now that is like simplified from a realistic fold and clothing principle, but you wouldn't, like, we wouldn't come up with this, or we wouldn't think of doing this unless we studied realistic clothing, unless we actually took a look at real like folds and clothings and how they worked, and then people kind of just like, okay, we're gonna kind of do it like this, and then we just kind of all rolled along with it, and it was like, okay, yeah, that is gonna be how we draw clothing. And it just ended up being that way. So that's kind of like the nice thing about like these kind of shortcuts. Same thing with legs. A lot of us kind of see like that tip where it's like from a profile view, it's like, oh, here's the leg, and then the calves, and then you maybe have the knees, and then you have the foot over here. Something like this. So you get that kind of like whole breakdown demonstration where you see people going like curve, straight, curve, straight. But the problem is, like, if you don't know where this comes from, you're just going to be kind of replicating it, and then when you get to angles like this, or where it's front facing, you're going to be like, wait, what do I do when it's like when it's front facing, or when the leg is twisted and turned in a certain angle? Like, how do I solve that? If all you know is this, but you don't know where it stems from, then you're going to be kind of stuck. You're going to be a little bit kind of lost in terms of how to solve it. So it's always a good idea to understand kind of where things come from, and kind of where these like kind of anatomical rules originated from. And if anyone is going into like lighting or kind of value, yeah, artist shorthand is what they're called basically. So we love to learn artist shorthands, and we have a lot of videos that cover artist shorthands. But artist shorthands are kind of weird, where they're only really good and if you know how to use them. So a lot of us kind of use artist shorthands to go like, oh, look at this cool trick or tip to drawing like my hands or my legs. But if you don't know why those shorthands work, it actually it can kind of sometimes ruin your drawing, where it doesn't feel right, something feels off, and it's because it's you're missing kind of like a key component of why it works. Yeah. Sharp angular too. Hey, nice. I see someone is also a fellow Scott Pilgrim enjoyer. I see that twin reference that you had there. That's a good tip. I might try that out. Also, I guess I don't need to erase that. I'll just make this go a little bit higher. But yeah, really good question. Oh, also, yeah, before I kind of move on to the next question, what I was gonna say is, like, if, you know, a lot of us kind of, myself included, I hated doing still life studies. But over time, I've kind of appreciated still life studies because you learn so much if you do still life studies properly. So if you do still life, what it teaches you is things like rendering, colors, values in terms of like lighting values, and all those things. You can always try to kind of understand it on paper, like, oh, I understand lighting and shadows and how all these things work, but until you try it out and until you kind of give it a shot as to, how it actually works, it's actually really, really hard. And it's the same thing with like drawing faces. You can learn as much as you want in terms of like reading books and be like, oh, this is how do you draw heads and all that kind of stuff, but until you give it an actual fair shot of trying out those drawing head proportion methods, it's actually really, really hard to understand why drawing heads uses certain kind of methodologies like the Loomis head method or the box head method, or like how does perspective work when drawing faces. Like all those things might sound very grand and very kind of abstract in the beginning, but you kind of just have to do it. You kind of just have to practice it and kind of put what you study to practice, and once you do that, it makes drawing much, much easier. Now you realize I don't know what her hand is doing on the other side, so I'm gonna kind of just make it up and we'll see how it turns out. Also, I'm gonna have to kind of also tie in the hands and make the staff kind of flow properly. Forget the second curve for the knee. Yeah, I get that's also like a good shorthand as well. Like the whole knees, like arms and all that kind of stuff. Like they're all shorthands. They're all good shortcuts, but it's always a good idea to know why you do those shortcuts before doing it, or else it can kind of be like, oh, it's like a cool little trick. It saved me so much time. It's like, yeah, it saved you so much time, but you can't use it everywhere. It's sometimes it works for some things, and other times you have to use it for works for some things, and sometimes it doesn't work for others. So you have to know when to use them, and the only way to know when to use them is by understanding where it comes from. So eventually you will have to learn kind of proper drawing structure and anatomy, unfortunately, which is what everybody wants to avoid, like myself included. Like, funny enough, I never kind of looked into anatomy like until after university, which sounds crazy. So like I went into art for illustration for university, and I always winged anatomy and figure drawing, and I was just like, I can just do it. I can just like pull it off. It doesn't matter. It's okay. But then I don't know, something just clicked where I just was like, okay, in order for me to actually get better, I need to know proper like anatomy. I need to properly figure it out. So yeah, you don't understand the why. Yeah, exactly. It'll hurt you more than hinder you if you don't understand the why. Right? Is the Galaxy S9 tablet good enough to upload tunes to print on demand? I don't know. Might as well. It's always a good idea to give it a shot and see if it works, but I don't know. Who knows? Okay, next question. Let's see. What is the favorite character design ever made? Okay, so we'll take a little bit of a short break from the drawing because I did grab an image, because this question kind of got me thinking. I'm like, do I have like a character design that I really like? So I did grab some that I was like, I do really like these. So this is one from Kill Bill. I think this is still up on our website. So if you go on our Wing Canvas website, I think this is still one of the images on my bios. But if it's not, it's from Kill Bill. And yeah, I was trying to go for like a kind of Disney style, but for a Kill Bill, which I think is like always like a fun thing to do. If you don't know what Kill Bill is, I guess this won't kind of make too much sense as to why this is kind of neat. But yeah, I thought this was like a nice little experimentation with the art style. Now, I do know that the mouth is way too low or the nose is way too high, but I was like, for the purposes of the design, I will make the nose and mouth technically not in the correct spot, which is, you know, in a way what a lot of art design and character design is a lot of, which is like cheating the quote unquote anatomical rules for the purposes and benefits of design. But yeah, I really like this one. This is still one of my favorite designs that I've done, or drawings that I've done, like a study that I did from, yeah, it is Uma Thurman. And then this is one that I did like years ago. I think, oh, you know what, let me take away the question. But yeah, the question is like, what is one of my favorite character designs? I think this is still also one of my favorite character designs that I've done. This was actually done on my own time. This was, I think, was this my first year? Yeah, my first year at Wing Canvas. And one of the first projects that we have in our character design summer camps that happens over the summer is a character style mashup. And I decided to combine Samus with Sailor Moon. So Sailor Moon is like, you know, dressed as Samus and has like the Samus kind of aesthetic to it. But then if any of you have ever played like Metroid before, especially like the Metroid Prime games, you'll know that there's a dark Samus as well. So I thought, I was like, oh, let's create the kind of like a counterpart, kind of like a dark Sailor Moon, kind of dark Samus, alter ego kind of a character. So that's kind of what this character is based on. So I kind of went like, it kind of, this is pretty close to what my style is now. I feel like if I were to redraw this, I might kind of reapproach the face a little bit differently. But yeah, very angular. Things are very sharp. Not too much rendering or shading. I typically work off like a 2-value shading scheme, but then I add like rim lighting, kind of like edge lightings around like both sides, and I usually like alternate between like the edge lighting. And then also shoes. So yeah, look at the shoes. I think this is honestly what got me into shoes, was drawing these, and I was like, oh man, these are I drew basically some boosts, some Adidas boosts for as like shoes for her. I don't know why I gave her boosts, but I was just kind of like, yeah, slip-on shoes, kind of like high-techy, kind of sleek looking. But yeah, and yeah, I kind of wanted this like slightly foreshortened piece. So if you're kind of wondering like, oh, what are all these like designs? It is based on Dark Samus's suit design. So like kind of the patterns that are there. And that's kind of why there's like these veins and kind of these like, I don't know, these kind of stitching cross sections on the suit, is because it's based on Dark Samus's suit design. And then I spent so much time on this gun. Oh my goodness, this gun took forever. Actually, I'm really happy with the lighting on the hand too. The hand took a really long time to figure out like how a hand would be positioned in this angle, holding this gun. But yeah, I think it turned out pretty good. But yeah, this one's kind of like I feel like one of my favorite pieces that I've ever done. Quite happy with this one. And then in terms of like recently, this is one that I did for animation intensive. I never got to kind of like continue working on it, but I feel like there's something kind of cool here that I want to kind of continue looking on, kind of working on down the line. But I feel like there's something cool here. I like the outfit. I kind of like just the black and white kind of design for her suit and outfit. So yeah, I thought like maybe I'll kind of continue on with this one. But yeah, those were kind of a little peek into like what are my favorite designs at the moment. But yeah. Or count as a prior experience when attending college. Do colleges need you to put down? I mean, sure. I wouldn't say that it wouldn't hurt to put it down that you've kind of taken some like extracurricular classes, whether it be ours or elsewhere. But yeah, I wouldn't say it doesn't hurt to kind of add it. I was gonna say your colors are so simple but so good. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's because I'm too lazy to render and color. So kind of going back to Giz somewhere out there's question about like just the amount of time. I'm someone who loves spending time on line work more than coloring, so that's kind of why I just end up having a two-tone kind of color scheme usually. But it's because I'm just too lazy to to render things. But I always want to try it out. Like I've never actually really rendered my characters like fully to like a finish before. But I'm kind of curious how I would kind of approach it in my style. Like obviously I've done renderings before, but I've like never done it in my style that I'm like kind of like happy with. So I'm kind of curious as to like how that would look and how it will work. Oh really? Oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that. That's cool to know that people kind of put us down for on their like college applications. It's kind of neat. And then I look forward to coloring. Not, I mean, you know, that's kind of how it is. Everybody has like a different forte and strengths. So I think like over the years, I've just kind of accepted that my forte is not necessarily rendering. Like I don't mind coloring if it's like flat and like kind of graphic shapes, because in general I prefer stylization and kind of simplification of forms and styles. So typically I don't try to go too all like spend too much time and go all in on coloring. But I don't know, there's something about line work that I just love doing. I just love doing line work. Okay, Mira, time to do Mira. I feel like this one's gonna be a little bit tricky because her face is real sharp, but like I need to also try to maintain. I want to try to maintain that Scott Pilgrim roundedness. So I feel like that's gonna be tricky. But yeah. Okay. Let's see. Next question. Let's bring it back up. Next question is, what skills are required to start animating for beginners? Gesture drawing skills, software knowledge, etc. I would say definitely have a good understanding, have good drawing skills. Animation, I think what kind of catches a lot of people off guard is how much drawing it requires, which sounds, I guess, kind of obvious, but I don't think people realize how much drawing it requires. So definitely go in, especially if you're doing like hand-drawn animation, go in understanding that it requires and demands a lot of kind of your drawing expertise. So having good understanding of anatomy and kind of like what we were talking about beforehand, things like structure. Structure is like a really, 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 really big part of animation, because you need to know how things are transitioning, how things are kind of moving in space when like the head is turning or when the body is twisting. And the best way is to just kind of sharpen and refine your observational figure drawing skills. So yeah. Okay, let's see. What do the twins look like? Yeah, I have all the volumes. I am not ashamed to admit I have all the volumes like right next to me. So like when I forgot who it was, but someone mentions like, oh, it's like the twins. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm going to just grab the volumes here and see how to draw it. To make it easier on myself, I am not going to draw her with the same expression as the poster, because then I would have to figure out where the eyes need to be, and that makes it a bit harder. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to draw her looking away from the camera. and I think that makes it easier. Josh the Scott Pilgrim Encyclopedia. Okay, but you know, I forgot the names of the twins. So, I love Scott Pilgrim, but I'm not gonna be like, I know every character's name and I know everything. Is that I don't. So, if I don't remember it, they'll give me a hard time. Hmm. That work? I don't know. I feel like it doesn't necessarily look like the Scott Pilgrim style, but yeah, I feel like I can't, I can only do so much. We're also kind of slowly coming down to time, so I also feel like I need to do some. I need to change Rumi's face a little bit. Uh, let's see. Why old animation from mid-late 40s are actually pretty good. I wouldn't say it's like. Is it because, well, I guess it's because they're kind of figuring it out as they're going when in like the old-timey animations. So I think like sometime or a lot of us kind of go like, I feel like the question is like, oh, how come there's almost like a sound of like it's surprising that old animation is good. But I guess like old animation just ended up being good because it's kind of like the first one, and like they had to do a lot of figuring things out for animation. So in that process of figuring things out, it's just like really good. And I think a lot of people kind of forget that like these people are like really really good. It's crazy because like these people essentially pioneered animation. If you think about it, it's like it's crazy. Like animation for full films, for full features, was not a thing, which is mind-boggling. Think about like how animation was not a thing until Disney decided like, hey, we're gonna make full-fledged animation. Like animation existed, but it was not to the degree and the finesse and fidelity that it is that we know it to this day. And it is the way that it is because of all the pioneering, in a way, all the pioneering, quote unquote pioneering, that they had to do for animation. So it's crazy. Okay, we have 20 minutes. Oh, but yes, going back to the question about like beginning animators, you really need to have like fundamentals down. So understanding perspective or just form and volume and structure is really good. Knowing just general proportions of figures is also really good. So you don't necessarily have to know all of the anatomy of people, but it's a really good idea to understand the underlying form and proportions and structure that makes up people. I think then anatomy can help kind of refine your drawings down the line, but I wouldn't necessarily prioritize anatomy right from the beginning. Anatomy kind of is like the cherry on top that really refines and sharpens your skills, but it's really more like structure and proportions and volume that really makes drawings look really really good. And yeah, just also just continue practicing like gesture, figure drawings, still life studies. Software knowledge is not too big of a deal because software is always changing. There's always new software that you can always learn and kind of study. But it's really the drawing chops that's kind of like the big thing. Okay, the next question is, oh, I noticed some of my character designs either look too cluttered or too simple. Any tips for making a balanced character design, one that is not too complicated but still interesting to look at? I think this is we kind of answered this in the earlier kind of session of our stream, which is that ultimately it comes down to the character's kind of personality and their traits, but also your style as well. I don't think that you can have character design that's too cluttered. I like to use examples from like Final Fantasy, where like characters are super dense. They're very detailed, and so there's nothing wrong with cluttered design as long as there's almost kind of like a purpose for it. So if the character is meant to be kind of like a trash collector, or they're living in a world that's very kind of, I don't know, like steampunky, then it kind of makes sense to have a lot of details in the character's design. But if they're meant to be more like, if it's meant to be more for like animation, like especially hand-drawn animation, or if it's meant where the style's meant to be a bit more cartoony and simplified, then yeah, you can have a bit too much clutter. But if you find that there's too much clutter, then simplify. It's always about like thinking back to like the big shapes that your character takes up. So I guess we can use like Rumi, for example. Rumi's design is like this big triangular headpiece here for her hair, and then that long kind of braided shape. And then when she wears this jacket, she has like a very boxy square like aspect to her like body, and then another square like shape, but maybe a trapezoid, but it's a little bit smaller for for like the hips, but then the legs are like triangular and tapered. So when you keep those kind of general shapes in mind, when you're adding detail to it, kind of keep in mind of like, do these shapes and do these forms still resonate when you look at your character? Can you still see these basic shapes and forms in your character's design when you're adding more detail? Because if you're adding too much detail and it's starting to break away and take away from the essential core shapes that make up your character, then yeah, maybe you might have to strip it down a little bit, maybe remove some elements, remove some objects, so that it's a little bit easier for audiences to see what it is that you're drawing. But at the end of it, to make a character interesting, it really is like, just because you need to make a character interesting, also I think you don't have to give your character a bunch of detail. Again, I don't know. Going back to Scott Pilgrim over here, there's not a lot of detail here. It's just a jacket, t-shirt with a star on it, and jeans for pants. Ramona, same thing. There's not really too much going on detail-wise. So sometimes it really comes down to the combination of clothes. That's why I say like fashion is like a big part of it. When you're designing your character's outfits, don't just kind of make it up. Try to look at like what are some trends that are out there, what works when it comes to clothing combination, what are people wearing, and when they make it work, why does it work? Is it because of the shapes? Is it because of the colors? Is it because of like the back and forth that's happening with these clothes? And when you start to kind of break down and try to dissect why things are the way that they are, it makes you a little bit more of a, I don't know, you're more observant about the things that are happening in the world around you. Makes you a little bit more of an effective designer. But yeah. Okay, the next question. Oh, okay, this was the question that somewhere out there had, which we answered, which is go out and touch grass. Essentially, was my was my answer, or just do something that you enjoy, that's fun, that's outside of your typical drawing routine. Let's see. This next question, we're coming near the end of our questions. What character design book would you recommend? Yeah, I remember this question. And what exercises do you do for character designing? Oh, I misspelled that. And how do you organize your ideas, thoughts when making a character? Okay, book-wise, there's a lot of different books. I always recommend that, like, if you're getting into kind of concept art books and you're like, you want to maybe collect some, I always go like, Tangled was a really good one. That's kind of my first concept art book that I got that I really liked. It just has like a really good collection of kind of drawings and breakdowns of like how they drew and came up with the characters. But yeah, that's kind of one. But if it's not about like kind of concept art books and it's like, oh, books to help you learn how to draw, uh, character design books. I never took any character design books just because I always kind of just observed drawings that other people had, and I would kind of work off of those pieces, kind of like the pieces that they already had. So for me, like I never had any instructional books on how to draw and character design. I really more just took inspiration from artists that I really enjoyed, and I took inspiration on like how they drew. And like I know I keep bringing up Scott Pilgrim, but yeah, Scott Pilgrim actually was one of my inspirations when I was around like high school. So like I really loved like the shapes, kind of like the more quirky and kind of more fun aesthetics that they had in the books compared to stuff that I was reading at the time like Naruto and Bleach, which was more realistic and more um kind of detailed in their drawings. But yeah, that's kind of that was kind of one I would say. Is like Scott Pilgrim was like a big one. But just looking at your stuff that inspire you, I think is already good enough. Instructional art books, it really depends on kind of what you want from them. If you're trying to go for maybe like anatomy and stuff, then obviously I always highly recommend kind of like the Loomis art book. I don't think you can go wrong with it. It is a little bit dated in how it's written, but I feel like you can't go wrong with that book. Um, yeah. Drawing the same characters over, especially for in book series, they will in fact be simple. Yeah. Okay, let's see. There was what exercises do you do for character design? Um, Figure drawing is one. Figure drawing I think is like a big one. A lot of times I will also kind of look for just references on the internet and try to stylize them. So I do this like kind of on my own time a lot. If you go on kind of like my Instagram, just shameless plug, but on my Instagram I do a lot of kind of portrait studies, but I don't try to copy it kind of like one to one, but instead I try to kind of stylize the lighting, maybe stylize the proportions a little bit, just so that it's a little bit different from the reference. Yeah, as we're kind of coming down to the end of the stream, if you guys have any extra questions, do let me know. And I think that was my oh wait, no, there's one more. What are some tricks to push through self-doubt and your inner critic? Okay. So this one I thought was kind of like a neat question. Um, but I thought I'd kind of offer my thoughts on it in general, especially like when I was like a maybe younger artist. That sounds so weird to say, but but um, I don't know. For myself, I try to be very optimistic, and just kind of knowing that you're in your growing pains was like something that helped for me at least. Knowing that is like okay, I'm trying to learn how to draw. I'm trying to get better. So there's no point kind of comparing myself or knowing that my stuff isn't maybe like the best at the moment. And so I think because of that mentality in general, I never was too harsh on myself when I was drawing. Um, but what I would kind of be kind of critical on was like, okay, how can I improve? And I say this a lot to my students as well in our class, which is just like there's nothing wrong with being critical or being uh kind of I don't know, like being harsh with your own drawings. I think that's totally fine and that it's totally okay to be a little bit hard on yourself, especially when you're trying to improve. But don't be too hard on yourself, and know when to kind of take it easy, and know when to kind of be harsh when critiquing your own drawings. Um, but every time I draw those, I'll be asking myself like, oh, what are some things that I can improve on? Is it the line work? What is working about my drawing? What is not working about my drawing? And how can I improve those things? So whenever I'm drawing, I'm always asking myself those questions, and I guess that's kind of what helped for me with not necessarily being too hard, but like having the right amount of criticism and critique on your own drawings. But it's kind of having that balance of knowing that you're improving and knowing that like things will improve over time, but you have to put in the work to kind of study and get better at those things. Also, I don't know what she's wearing on her wrists, so I'm kind of just making it up off the top of my head. Is your Instagram linked on Wing Canvas? Yeah, I think so. I believe all of our like extra kind of side links are included on our website. So yeah, if you guys ever want to check out any of the instructors' kind of personal Instagrams, you can go on our website, because I do think that they're linked. But yeah, I am very bad at posting, so if you're like, Josh, there's like nothing there that's new, and it's like, yeah, I haven't posted in a while. It's been a hot minute since I've posted anything on Instagram, but I have a bunch of like just stored studies and references that I have not had a chance to like just draw. So yeah. But I will get to uploading it eventually. Study, practice, draw, critique. Yeah, actually, that's a good way of kind of putting it. Yeah. I do a lot of. It sounds kind of, maybe a bit odd, but the first time I told my friend this, he was like, "What? You just sit there?" There's a lot of times where I'll just kind of, after I finish a drawing, I'll just stare at it. And one, it's to just appreciate the drawing that you did. You put in the work, you put in kind of like the effort and the time to work on your drawing. So I think it's totally, totally valid to appreciate the work and the hard work that you put in. But the other thing that I like to do is like while looking at it, to also start kind of asking myself, what are some things that I can improve on? And like, is my drawing looking the way that I thought it would be looking? So sometimes we go into a project going like, oh, okay, this is my goal. And then it never turns out that way. So I think it's always a good idea to kind of go in and have like a goal for your drawing, and then at the end of it kind of ask yourself, did you meet that goal? So if the goal was lighting, or if the goal was to practice using like shape design or using interesting forms for your characters, did you execute that well? Did you accomplish your goal? And to just be a little bit picky on yourself, kind of be like, oh, did I accomplish my goal? And I think it's totally fine to be picky for yourself in that regard, to be a little bit like, can I get better? Can I improve on these like line work pieces and all that kind of stuff? I know we are coming to the end. I am like realizing, oh, I do not have enough time to outline all of these, but so I will maybe just kind of just keep outlining it till the end. But thank you everybody for joining the stream. Maybe I'll kind of just say the closing statements, and then if people want to stay on, they can stay on. If you guys don't want to stay on, because you guys need to go, because it is pretty late. It is now getting to 11. Thank you so much for joining, and hope you guys enjoyed this Q&A session. I will stay on a little bit longer just to kind of clean up the drawings and kind of just like add in all the little bits of kind of details that are kind of remaining on this piece. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Love staring at my art when it's done. I'm glad to hear that I am not the only one that does this. But yeah, I don't know. I love staring at my drawings afterwards. But then I also then love being like, what can I do better? What is missing in my drawing right now? So I also love doing that part of critiquing my own drawing. So study, do the actual drawing itself, and then afterwards do some critiquing of your own drawings. Be like, oh, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? And what can I improve on and change the next time for my drawing? I think that's like a pretty good kind of, I don't know, regimen to have. Maybe I'll just finish one character. And then maybe the other character I'll finish off camera, and then I'll post it for you guys. Because I think it'll be pretty much the same. You guys saw me draw the character. I'm just basically cleaning up the line work and outlining it. So yeah, I'm just gonna finish. I already forgot her name, this character, but I'm gonna finish this one, and then I will close off the stream officially, and I will then keep an eye out on our Discord, because I'll be uploading the drawing there, and you guys can take a look at it a little bit closer. But again, like I said, thank you so much for joining our stream. I hope you really enjoyed these Q&A sessions. I believe we have one more with Jesse's, so keep an eye out for that one. That one will be coming up soon, I believe. Maybe I'll finish this one, and then I'll kind of chime in as to like when the next one is. Zoe, yeah, this is Zoe. Yeah. Also, I don't have any references for how she's holding these knives. Like, it's kind of, the image is not very clean, so I can't tell exactly how she's holding these knives. But here's Zoe. Not exactly in perfect Scott Pilgrim style, but you know, it's a little bit of a mishmash between the two. Anyone else start to dislike your drawing after staring at it for too long? I mean, that's that could also be a thing that happens. So yeah, no, it's totally understandable. Oh, this is your question too? Oh, yeah. So hopefully you caught the answer somewhere out there. But basically, I think it's totally okay to be critical and kind of be not harsh, but be honest with your kind of critiques with your drawings, but also kind of know that you're in your growing pains and that you're going to improve over time. So keep drawing, keep practicing, but also still be kind of critical and honest about your own skills and your own drawings, and kind of have like a little bit of like a goal post, so knowing like where your skills where you want your skills to go afterwards, and kind of like your trajectory for your skills. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining the stream. I hope you guys enjoyed it and had a good time. I'm just gonna read off our closing statements and we'll end off the stream. And like I said, I'll post these drawings afterwards. And yeah, so thank you everybody for joining us. My name is Josh, and I'm one of the instructors here at Wing Canvas. And we here at Wing Canvas, our mission is to make art education easily accessible to everyone. So join us for free live stream lessons on YouTube every week and level up your skills with our community of art nerds. And we're more than just a YouTube channel. We're an online school of illustration and visual storytelling dedicated to helping artists turn their passion into income. So a huge shout out to our amazing students and members for supporting our mission. And we love seeing your incredible artwork and watching you guys grow in our classes and weekly critiques. And if you want to dive deeper, join our Discord to access stream notes and demos and exclusive artworks, art challenges, and more free resources to help you improve your drawing skills. So come connect with fellow art nerds and get inspired. And also, this stream is sponsored, and our sponsor for today is XP Pen. We'd like to thank our sponsor for the stream, XP Pen, who have an amazing selection of digital art tablets for both beginner and advanced artists. And if you're looking for an affordable and reliable digital tablet, go browse their store. You'll find the link in the description below. So again, thank you, XP Pen, for supporting and sponsoring our stream. And that's kind of it. Thank you guys so much for kind of hanging out with me and asking your questions. And for those who submitted your questions, hopefully I answered them the best that I could. And hopefully the answers kind of helped you guys out in your art journey. Oh yeah, I was going to check out when the next stream was. So the next stream is this Saturday, and it is Jesse's stream. So this one is going to be another Q&A stream with Jesse, and it's going to be October 25th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So yeah, you guys have Jesse's stream to look forward to kind of bombard her with your questions. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Here is the kind of my drawing so far. I feel like this turned out not too bad. Not exactly in the Scout Pilgrim style, but I would say it's like not too bad. Close enough. Yeah. Hope you guys have a good night, good rest of the week, and a good weekend. Stay safe out there, and stay well dressed. Stay warm out there, I guess, since it's starting to get cold. Winter's coming. Okay. Bye, guys. Have a good night. See you later.